G'day and welcome to another video. Yes, just for once I'm actually on camera and proof that I do actually exist. I'm not just a pair of hands and a voice. So the video today is on the IBM PS1, but to tell its story we need to go back a few years. In 1984 IBM released the PCjr, which, give or take, didn't really go so well. So when they had another go at it in 1990, did they learn from their lessons? Well, sort of. Let me explain. To put this into context, we have to go back to the PCjr. Following an immense amount of hype leading up to its launch, the PCjr fell somewhat flat. To begin with, it wasn't 100% compatible with IBM's market-leading personal computer range, and it came with a price tag significantly higher than the other home machines available at the time. Not only that, it came lumbered with a horrible chiclet keyboard. It wasn't particularly fast in its basic configuration. Its new cartridge system was expensive and underutilized, and its expansions were through a completely proprietary sidecar interface. But the only things the PCjr brought to market that were good were its graphics and sound capabilities, of which Tandy would eventually replicate, build a properly PC-compatible machine around, and essentially run off with the home market with its 1000 series of computers. By 1985, the PCjr was pulled from the shelves. Fast forward 5 years and IBM wanted to have another go at the home market. Riding a wave of success they had found with their PS2 line, the PS1 range was released with the initial model being the 2021, running a 286 processor. At least this time around it sported some standard interfaces such as IDE for the hard drive. However, as the range progressed, many varying models were released, some using standard ISA expansion, but many fell back into the proprietary nature of the PCjr, using custom slots for memory expansion, sound, and a lot of other extras. The machine we have here is the PS1 2121, which falls directly into that later description. It's an incredibly neat machine with a fairly small footprint and certainly would have looked good on the shelf at any number of consumer computer stores. But that's not to say it was perfect. If you hadn't noticed yet, that isn't a standard keyboard sitting in front of it. The keyboard that came with the PS1 was the much maligned IBM Model M2 keyboard. It utilised buckling springs but over membranes. However, it was also of way lower build quality, especially compared to what people were expecting from IBM keyboards at the time. It also suffered from what I call early 90s capacitor syndrome. Mine has had numerous repairs attempted on it, and in the end it's been swapped out for a proper Model M, which I probably don't need to tell you is a huge upgrade. The mouse, on the other hand, was borrowed directly from the PS2 range. It's certainly not a bad unit, but it's also nothing exciting. The front of the machine is a pretty simple affair. We have the continuously unreliable 1.44 meg floppy drive, also taken from the PS2, and a hard drive LED, and that's about it. The power button is actually built into the monitor. Taking what would seem to be a leaf out of Amstrad's book, IBM decided to build the machine's power supply into the back of the monitor, with it powering both components. It's actually not a bad design, however, if the monitor was to ever fail or be separated from the computer, it quickly leaves both parts useless. Around the back we also find our normal range of ports, a standard VGA port, and the second plug from the monitor that provides both power to the computer but also takes the PC speaker sound from the PC to the speakers in the monitor. Then there is the usual printer port and two PS2 ports. This machine has been fitted with the 25-pin serial port as opposed to the optional modem. Getting inside is pretty simple. The front cover simply clips off and the entire top cover slides forward. Internally it's fairly well laid out and compact. Other than the floppy and hard drives, almost everything else is built into the motherboard. The motherboard on this machine holds a 386SX processor running at 16 MHz. There is 2 meg of RAM and onboard floppy and hard drive controllers. However, it is worth pointing out some of the proprietary expansions. Firstly is the expansion port for either the serial port or the modem. Then we have a plug for the optional sound card. And finally another proprietary expansion port, and no, that's not PCI or MCA, for an optional expansion unit that would sit between the machine and the monitor. Memory was expanded from a custom port on the front of the machine, just behind the front cover. I can only guess that the idea was to make upgrading the memory easier for the average user. However, 30-pin SIMs would have been a bit better in my opinion. So, for now, this machine will be stuck with the basic 2 meg of memory. In line with the home nature of the PS1 range, IBM designed a fairly simple yet straightforward boot interface. Known as the 4-quadrant screen, it gave you quick access to information services like Prodigy, access to MS Works which came preloaded, your software which gave you actually an impressively well laid out view of the file system, and a link to IBM DOS, which actually takes you straight to DOS 5's shell application. Funnily enough, the exit back to normal DOS is buried under your software. Like I said, it's a pretty neat looking machine. It's compact and doesn't take up much room on your desk, and its 12-inch VGA monitor is sharp and bright and more than enough for most users. Performance-wise, well, the 386SX16 processor isn't bad, but was easily outclassed by its faster variations or the 386DX range. The 2 meg of memory does strangle it a little. In theory, that is actually upgradable. However, in practice, now in 2018, those memory expansion cards seem to be made completely from unobtainium.
So as you can probably tell, the PS1 isn't without faults. And to be honest with you, neither was mine when I very first got it. So I found it on Gumtree. And it was sold to me as working, just needs boot disks. And I thought, oh, that's fine, I'll get it home, I'll run off some DOS disks and we'll be laughing. Now, in saying that, I'm not that familiar with the PS1 or specifically the PS2 range, which this is obviously very related to. And so I got it home, I ran off some disks, I plugged it all in, I powered it up, and I kept getting this beep, 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 beep sound, and 3 error codes on the screen. Now, the upshot of the older IBM stuff is it's actually really well documented online. So it's really just a case of look up the error code, see what the problem is, fix it. So the 3 error codes that came up, one was 303, which is faulty keyboard or faulty keyboard controller, and 2 more relating to the BIOS having been reset. And I didn't realise the pain I was about to go through in regards to BIOSes on this on this era of IBM. So I thought I'd start work on the keyboard because that was in theory the easiest thing to start on. But as I mentioned before, this isn't the original keyboard. This one is. This is the IBM M2 keyboard, and to be completely honest with you, it's rubbish. So the first thing I did was start by replacing 2 capacitors which sit up in the little circuit board back here. And that actually got rid of the 303 error, and the machine started to boot, and I thought, awesome. Until I discovered that I had no keys. And so that was fun. So the whole thing came apart and everything was cleaned and yada yada yada, put it all back together, and then I started again and beep 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 again, but a different error. It was 301 or 29 or something anyway, and it was error code, and it was saying, you know, one of the keys was stuck. So I looked that up, worked out what key it was, and made sure I cleaned everything around it and yada yada, put it all back together again, and then I got another one stuck and another one stuck, and then the next time around nothing would work. And the other thing is every time you pull this thing apart, every one of the buckling springs, the little mechanisms behind each keycap, have to completely come out. You do whatever you need to do, and then you've got to sit there and balance the thing upside down and drop in all the springs all over again, put it all back together, put all the keycaps on. So it works out to be about an hour and a half turnaround every time you want to actually do something on the keyboard. And to be completely honest, after a while, I didn't quite throw it through the wall, but it got very close. But I did get to the point where I think it was like Sunday afternoon, I jumped on the car, I went to work, I grabbed a PS2 keyboard that I had there, came home, plugged it in, and I was actually able to keep moving on the rest of the machine. And then a few days later, this Model M popped up on Gumtree for a really reasonable price too, especially considering the crazy prices they go for these days. And this is actually my very first Model M, and I'm really happy with it. So I'm really not, in the end, apart from like wasting an entire weekend on this thing, I'm really not that complaining, because now I have a Model M. Anyway, so I finally got the thing to boot, and got past the keyboard error. And I knew the other two errors were related to the BIOS, and given the age of this machine, I thought, oh, you know, that's fine. I'll swap the BIOS battery out and walk straight into the world of pain that is a dead BIOS on a PS2 or PS1 machine. After all the research I did, and I realised that all I needed was a DOS boot disk with a couple of configuration utilities on it to boot it up, reset up the BIOS, and then I was off. And it was at that point I realised that I also had a dead floppy drive. So, which shouldn't have really surprised me, because I've seen in other people's videos and stuff like that, that the floppy drives in these and the PS2s and so on aren't really the most reliable in the world. If you ever have a look at Modern Classics video just recently on his P70 luggable, the pain that he went through there was just was nuts. So again, I probably spent about half a day pulling it apart, lubricating, cleaning, adjusting, anything I possibly could, and eventually, slowly but slowly, I managed to get to read discs. Like the first time it would start to boot, and then it would throw a can't read error, and then it would get a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further, and eventually I actually finally got it to boot it off a disc. And by this time I chewed through like a dozen discs, constantly thinking, oh, maybe it's the media, or they're old discs, whatever. And I finally got to boot up off a DOS 622 floppy boot disk, and so 622 ended up on this machine. So I was then able to run the configuration utility and realize that I had a dead hard drive, because it just would not detect the hard drive. And then I put my ear right up to the hard drive and realized it wasn't even spinning. And so I thought, oh, dead hard drive. Now I hummed and hawed about then going back to work and getting an IDE. I've got a pile of old IDE hard drives, and I thought, oh, I'll put another IDE hard drive in it. And then I just kind of realized, well, what's the point? It's only going to fail again. So it ended up with a compact flash hard drive, because it's just the most reliable thing to use these days in old PCs. And it's just an easy solution, especially for getting programs and stuff on it. Anyway, so with that in there, I finally got the BIOS detected hard drive, and I could install MS-DOS. Once DOS was on there and it was happy and all the rest of it, I then was able to take this and obviously drop the install files on it for Extra Gold games and Windows 3.1. And I had a running PS1. Now, the reason I bought the PS1 is I was actually keeping my eye out for something like an IBM Model 25, one of the small all-in-one machines. LGR did a video a while back on a black and white, real base model black and white Model 25, and I just thought it was just the most awesome little machine. And he's also got like that 486 compact Presario all in one, and I just think that's a really neat machine as well. But then this popped up on Gumtree, not that far from home, and like it isn't an all-in-one, obviously, because it's two separate pieces. But you're just kind of looking at it, it looks like an all-in-one. So I'm more than happy with this, and it's got a nice VGA monitor and the 386 processor. I wish I could put more RAM into it, but like I said, just you can't get those RAM cards anymore. But with it all working, it basically just got a dust and a clean. Cosmetically, it was in really good condition. It didn't need like retro brighting or anything like that. And so, yeah, I now have a working PS1, and it's actually a great little machine. I mean, it's slow and, but it's a 386. I don't think it's meant to be fast, at least not by today's standards. So, yeah, I'm really happy with it.
Like most home machines of its day, it's not a standout at any one particular thing. Right now it can happily play games really well from, say, the 286 era, such as Indy 500 and Stunts but does start to struggle a little bit with Wolfenstein 3D. IBM finally did learn its lessons from both the PC Junior and the PS1 lines when it followed up the PS1 with the Aptiva range in 1994. And in reality, the PS1 line is barely a blip in computer history. Not as noteworthy as the PC Junior, not as common as the Aptiva, and no important story to tell like the PS2 range. But the PS1, or the baby PS2 as some call it, was a range of machines built by one of the most important businesses in computing history, and for that alone it's worth telling its story.
So thank you for watching my little video on the PS1. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope me being on camera for the first time wasn't too much of a jarring experience for you. If you liked it, please click like down below and subscribe if you want to see more. Thank you.